Hello, GOLD participants from around the world. I'm Fleur Bickford, Program Director and MC for GOLD Learning. I'm chatting today with Dr. Rebecca Dekker, who is our opening keynote speaker for GOLD Perinatal 2016. Her upcoming presentation is titled Evidence-Based Care, What It Is, What It Isn't, and How to Help Families Find It. So welcome, Rebecca, and thank you for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we are very excited about your upcoming presentation. Now, before we talk about your presentation that's coming up, maybe you could just tell us and our listening delegates a little bit about yourself, and also I'm curious about your website. Your website is called Evidence-Based Birth, and I'm curious, what was the catalyst for you starting that website?
Sure. So I am the mother of three small children, ranging in ages from 8 to 2, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky. And I am a nurse, and I have my PhD and master's in nursing. And I started evidence-based birth in 2012 after the birth of my second child. I was inspired to start it. Partly I knew I could do it because I was so empowered after the birth of my baby, but because I realized how hard it was to find evidence-based care and to understand it and to, figure out what I wanted and then to actually get it was quite a challenge. And I wanted to take all of the research that I'd been collecting over the past few years and make it accessible to anybody else that might need it. And I thought maybe 10 people would, stumble across my website. And if it helped 10 people, then I was happy with that. So I also, another catalyst was I had done some speaking with family medicine residents in their residency, and they really liked that I was bringing them these summaries of the evidence and these handouts, and they said we could always use help like finding evidence to base our practice on. And so I thought, if they found these handouts helpful, maybe other people would too. So I just kind of on a whim reserved the domain name evidencebasedbirth.com and started posting my reviews of the evidence. And little did I know that it would just like take off and kind of create a ripple of change around the world, that my message was really resonating with people and that people really needed a place they could go to find that kind of information.
Wow, that is amazing, and it must be so exciting to, be able to reach people like that. And, you just said if you were able to reach 10 people, that would be great. And I know that your website reaches far more than 10 people these days, doesn't it?
Right. Well, I just couldn't believe the traffic. It was like doubling every month. And I just knew that I had hit on something. So and it's what parents want. Parents of today want evidence-based care, and they're trying desperately to find it. And so I feel like I really there were several other websites that they could go to as well, but not what I was envisioning. And so I was very fortunate to be able to kind of put that vision into practice and actually create something that could be useful for people all around the world.
That's wonderful, and I think the fact that you do have that kind of traffic to your website really says something about the fact that people really want this information, and it's such a wonderful thing that you're able to bring that to people. I'm curious, evidence-based care, it gets talked about a lot, but I think often people don't necessarily understand fully what that means, and I know you're going to talk a lot about that in your upcoming presentation. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what do you feel is the biggest misconception about evidence-based care?
Sure. Well, I think probably the biggest misconception is that you just take research evidence and then you ignore everything else. And evidence-based care, key part of that is actually the person, the patient, or the client, whatever you would call them, their values, goals, and preferences. And you can't do evidence-based decision making without incorporating that person's unique, situation and their preferences. And the people who originally started the whole concept of evidence-based medicine included that in their definition. It was a key part of it. I mean, they came right out and said you cannot have evidence-based care without following the patient's preferences and taking those into account. And that gets ignored probably the most today, and most people don't even realize that's part of evidence-based care. I've even been contacted by people who email me and say, like, I never heard this definition before. Where did you find it from? I'm like, well, if you go to the founders of evidence-based medicine and read their original textbook, like, that's where it came from. The second biggest misconception is that intuition doesn't play any role. And so sometimes you'll see that among people in the natural birth world. They'll say, well, there's nowhere for my intuition as a clinician or a mother. And it is. It can still be part of that evidence-based care triad that we'll talk about in my presentation. So intuition, the only difference is that the way we used to do things was only based on intuition and your personal experiences. And now we also include evidence into the decision-making process. So it's a bit more inclusive definition and expansive definition than I think most people are used to hearing.
That is so interesting to hear. And I think you're right. A lot of people, don't hear that. And we think of, evidence-based care as very, scientific. Here's the research. This is the way things are supposed to be done. But such an important point that you make that, it has to be done within, you have to take into account what the individual, people and families want and need. I think that's such an important part of it. And really looking forward to hearing more about that in your presentation. So just as we finish up our little chat here, what do you hope delegates will take away from this presentation and be able to take back with them to their own practices?
Sure. So I really hope that they walk away with ideas for how they can help families get evidence-based care, both from like the macro level and the micro level. So on the macro level, I hope they walk away with techniques that they can use to help change the system, when they're not at a birth, when they're working on the system itself, because the entire system is kind of a little bit messed up, and we're going to talk about that in my presentation. And then hopefully they'll also have some good techniques that they can use at the micro level with individual clients to help them as they navigate the somewhat messed up system. So that is what I hope they walk away with, is those tactics they can use at the macro level and at the micro level.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. And I know I'm really excited about hearing your presentation, and I know our delegates will be too. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
And thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be the keynote this year.
Yes, well, we are excited to have you. And for our delegates who are listening, you will be able to hear more from Dr. Rebecca Dekker on October 11th. That is our keynote day. And she will be speaking at 1600 UTC and again at 2200 UTC. You can visit our GOLD Perinatal website for all of the details and to figure out what those times are in your local time zone. And again, her presentation is titled Evidence-Based Care, What It Is, What It Isn't, and How to Help Families Find It. Thanks so much for joining everyone today. Bye for now.